event. This is our monthly event, and I'm very grateful that we sustained for the past 5 years. The recent book discussion we had on Islam, the covenants fulfilled, we managed to attract more than 4,000 viewers through our videos, recorded videos, through Facebook and YouTube. So, and this is the last part, the first discussion on this book. I would like Professor Zaini to talk about
Allah.
The name of Allah, and then probably to conclude. Next month, on the 16th of December, we are going to start a new book, Himpunan Risalah oleh Professor Syed Naquib al-Attas. It's a very thick book. And it is jointly published by IB, FIM, and CASIS. I hope that we can start reading this book. This book is very good. This is the Malay book. People are complaining that our events always in English. I said, okay, we try to find books that can be also understood and followed by Malay readers. I would like to invite Professor Zaini to continue, and we probably have about 1 hour discussion on this, and in between probably we have question and answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Dato Zaini and Datin Seri, who's still away. She's on the way, inshallah. Always, it's a pleasure to be here and to share some things that I've read from this book and experiences going through the work. I would like to begin by saying that it's not easy to follow the thought of a great thinker. We really have to swim in his ocean of meanings, and in order to understand his meaning, we have to be very familiar with his body of work. And partly in any discipline, for example, either physics, engineering, whatever, you have to be familiar with the technical terms that are being used, or the jargons being used, and also the phrasal structure of sentences be used in a particular discipline. And then you're very familiar. And it has to do with what we're going to be discussing today, the final part of the book, which is where Professor Syed Naquib al-Attas devotes the question of the name Allah. He begins by saying that this name Allah is not a concoction or made up of human language. I thought about that for a long time. How is it that the name Allah is not human made? You see? Because people say it's Arabic, you see. In the discussion from page 82 until the end, 98, the discussion is about the name Allah. And people say because it's a contraction or a contraction of the word al and ilah. But then Prof. al-Attas was explaining that on page 83, you see, it is said that the name Allah is originally Al-Ilah. Then because of deemed heavy to articulate it, the Hamza is being something to do with language, and it's called Ishtiqaq, derivation, and also Tasrif. You have the name Allah. So that's, Prof. al-Attas was explaining, that's the nature of a language. And this is why before that, page 82, he described what the language is from the Quran. There's something called lugha, and that is, lugha in general sense is applicable to all mankind. Arabic language, that's, lughatul Arabiya. Then the Persian language, lughatul Farisiya, Persian. And lughatul Uthmaniya, and then lughatul Jawiya. Sebab itu, like Raniri, I have a sample here, like his work on Haludil, I'm working on, and we're going to refer to this work in a bit also. When he translates something, he said, "An utarjima ila lughatul Jawiyya." So the Malay language is not Malay language, but lughatul Jawiyya. But in English, it has to be translated as Malay language. Then there's something called lisan. Lisan is the tongue of a people, you see. So you have the Malay tongue, you have the Persian tongue, you have the Indian tongue. And then you have something called kalam. Kalam is the speech itself. Now, in the kalam, like when we are speaking, that's called kalam. You speak, when you speak, you represent a certain tongue. That certain tongue, when it becomes a body of kalimat, and then structurally, when you want to analyze it, when you want to treat it formally, that is called a language. That's a lugha. But all of these are human attributes. And this is why Prof. al-Attas, when he wrote or when he tried to define what wahyu is, and he mentioned it in the book Prolegomena, he says wahyu is a special communication between God and his chosen prophet, not in any language. Because, and this is also explained by scholars from this part of the world, because then that would somehow precondition God is in need of a human attribute. Language is a human attribute in order to communicate. Therefore, when he communicates to the qalb of the prophet, it is not in Arabic, it is not in Persian, it's not in English, it's not in whatever. That's why in the case of Adam, Professor Latas mentioned here, we just call it Adamic language because we do not know what language he spoke. He also, Allah Ta'ala mentioned, when, the first instance of speech that happens within man, human being, so to speak, and God, when Allah Ta'ala commanded our, our zuriyat, when he gathered all of us. That is a description. And when Allah Ta'ala says, Alastu bi Rabbikum, the day of Alastu that is mentioned, that is a description of an event in Arabic of the Quran, not Arabic of the kalam of the Arabs, not the lisan of the Arabs, not the language of the Arabic people, but it's a Quranic Arabic. And this is why it's very important to distinguish this. All right? It's very important. Of course, in order to analyze the Arabic of the Quran, we will use the scientific nature of Arabic of what we know today, because that is human nature. But there are certain conditions, meaning certain context of the Quran, that normal Arabic analysis cannot apply. Because the Quran, the Arabic of the Quran is the standard itself. It's the highest standard of the Arabic. So, therefore, when Allah Ta'ala describes that he says to all of us, Alastu bi Rabbikum, that is a description. It's not in a matter of the Arabic tongue. It's not in Arabic tongue. It's not in human language. So this is why that is, and remember this book is about covenants fulfilled. It refers to two of the covenants. One is that one, the Alastu bi Rabbikum, the covenant between Allah Ta'ala and humankind. And we recorded in the event as replying in the affirmative. So we say, yes, we do believe. Next is the covenant with the prophets. It is with the covenants of the prophets that Allah Ta'ala made known his name to all the prophets at that particular moment in creation. Let's put it that way, not more in time, because there's no time at that particular context. And I remember somebody asked me, quoting the Quran, isn't it not the name of Allah was mentioned to Sulaiman, because there was a verse referring that, Sulaiman was mentioned, was quoted saying that. Then I answered by saying, remember, these are events recorded in the Quran in the language of the Arabic of the Quran, but the language of Sulaiman is not Arabic. But the name of Allah, the name of Allah given to Sulaiman knows it, because all prophets have the name, but it was corrupted. And this is why we say a corruption of earlier revelations, meaning they were not preserved to sustain as revelation for the rest of time, for the rest of humanity. And this is why only the Quran, it is mentioned that Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidhun. We are the ones who reveal the reminder, and it is up to us to preserve it. So the preservation of the Quran is not so much the preservation of the language of Arabic of the people, but it's the Arabic of the Quranic Arabic. That's what we must understand.
So again, between what is lughah in Malay, bahasa,
Lughah bahasa.
lisan,
Lisan is tutur kata.
and then kalam,
Kalam
bicara.
is
bicara.
bicara. That's right.
Bahasa, tutur kata, and
Bicara.
bicara.
Yeah. And that's why this and in fact, this is why certain languages, and in fact Arabic and Malay properly, they have different style of writing referring to this event. They become scientifically written. Unfortunately today, for example, Jawi is not the Jawi of tutur kata. Actually, Jawi of lughah. That's why it's a lughatul Jawiyah. Bahasa persuratan. That's right. So when you surat, as I said, it becomes a very formalized language. And that's why in English it's like the same thing too. They call different degrees of writing. Huh? You write for your PhD not in the style of a secondary high school writing, isn't it? And when you write philosophy, you don't write the style of a newspaper. It doesn't work that way. Okay, but I like to go to the next one. This is very important. The next page 83, and I want to explain something. The isim, the kalima, because we're going to get to that point later. But this is very important. A name is a word, it's a kalima, of course. You know, macam Muhammad is a word, but it becomes a name. And it points to an object of thought, and that is known. The object must be known. Now, when it is written in symbolic form, meaning it's written in huruf. But when it is written in huruf, consider in this way that it is written in arrangement of letters and articulate sound. It is not. It is a lafaz. Dia just bicara saja. Sebab tu kadang-kadang bicara omong-omong kosong. You know, it doesn't apply to something what is called is not substantive. What does that mean? I give you an example. This is very clear, but this is what I mean. You have to be very familiar with the writing Prof. al-Attas and what he meant by it. You see, mathematics. People say it's a language of science, isn't it? So much so that economics wants to put everything in mathematical formula. Engineering, you must have formula, fluid dynamics, equation of energy, F is equal to ma. Nobody speaks the language of science. It's not substantive, but it does refer to something. But for many people, it's unknown because we are not trained in it. Right? So, like substantive meaning, Zainiy Ujang, Zainiy Uthman. But there is something called Zaini, you know, something that beautifies. Now it becomes a concept. So this is why the discussion when something called a human language, it is something written. So mathematics is a human created language, much like coding. Coding is completely human created language. Betul tak? And really it doesn't apply to anything substantive. Seriously, it has no counterpart that is real. Fascinating. But the effect can be real. So this is sometimes the power of language. And this is why, as we said earlier, things like doa. Doa is tutur kata. It's lisan and it's also kalam. You know? That's why it has an effect. See?
What is the difference between kalam and lafaz?
Kalam, this is what we're going to see. Kalam is when you speak something, sometimes you use lafaz in kalam. You see, for example, the definition in Arabic is that a sentence is made out of kalima, and that sentence is kalam. The lafaz is the enunciation of these words. They may not refer to anything. You know, macam as I say, it's lafaz. It does not refer to anything, but you associate it with is pleasurable, painful. So you have to see a context, but There's nothing really associated with it. But this is where, as I said, this is human language, and we have human experience to associate them with a meaning. Allah is not like that. And that is why Professor Attas is saying Allah is not created. Because partly he started out by explaining who Allah is. And this is very difficult. And that's why you start at 82. Allah is a name designating an essence, the self of the most exalted being who calls himself by that name. You see, this is why there is a saying, La uhti sana'an alayka kama atnaita ala nafsik. You know, I cannot extol praises to you except by names or by praises that you have praised yourself. That's why we can say, Alhamdulillah, Subhanallah. That is the statement by Rasulullah SAW sendiri. That's why it is therefore not a human language, the name Allah. So therefore, when people say, Allah is a contraction, that's not right. This is what Professor Attas is trying to say. So Dato see Zaini Ujang's question. What about non-Muslim using this name? That is their problem, because we have no problem for them using it, but we are trying to correct them. Are you using the name correctly to refer to Allah, the God of... Then you are halfway becoming a Muslim. Do you want us to describe you like that? Then you might not be very happy. You see, because perchance in your so-called, to use the term by Christine Amanpour, if you misspeak, you say Prophet Muhammad was there, and then you admit that there's a person called Prophet Muhammad, then you somehow complete the puzzle. Inadvertently became a Muslim. That's why it's very important, because we are concerned about using the term properly, and you cannot associate names as you wish. And this is why Surah An-Najm, among other 3 places mentioned in the Quran, about these names of God that are created by humankind. You know, An-Najmu idha hawa, wa ma dalla sahibukum wa ma gawa, you know. And this name that is mentioned, you know, أَفَرَأَيْتُمُ اللَّاتَ وَالْأُزَّى وَمَنَاتُ ثَلَاثَةِ الْأُخْرَى أَلَكُمُ الذَّكَرُ وَلَهُ الْأُنْثَى. You know, this name Al-Manat, Al-Lat, Al-Uzza. And then they give them attributes. They are female, feminine, there's masculine. And these are gods and goddesses of the ancient Arabic. You know, they are much like the ancient gods and goddesses of the ancient Roman Empire, because they live at the same time. So they must have so-called something similar in the idea of divinities. So they believe in that. So the Romans have, you know, macam-macam Hera, you know, Zeus, whatever, you know, the Greeks have them. The same thing if you look, I'm sorry not to be very pejorative, but you look even at the Indians, they have so many divinities, you know, gods and goddesses, they have names. So these are names, you know, just a sideline. In the olden days of the Greek mythology, you know, you have like Hercules, you have like Achilles. When they die, or they have a certain so-called superhuman capability, their immortality celebrated by putting them in the sky. So their names, planets and stars. So that's celebration of a... Now they don't do that. Now they put them on the street, and has celebrated on dekat Hollywood somewhere, you know, the street of stars on the street. That's what they do. So they bring them down here now.
In the past,
they celebrate in the sky, in the heavens.
Oh,
yeah, now the stars are here. Because they are actually, you know, the manipulation of human and divinity, so to speak, you know, like Hercules and whatever you. So, like Medusa, you know, there is a Buruj that has the face of Medusa in it. Fascinating, you know. So, the Quran described about that there were earlier experiences of humankind or earlier civilizations with divinities. They give them names. And this is why the event of Ibrahim alayhi salam, when, you know, the story goes that he broke all the idols and then he left the biggest one. So, you know, as the big one. See, because these are what we have concocted in terms of divinities. So this is what Professor Attas is trying to say. So the name Allah is original. This is the real meaning of the word original. There is no duplicate to it. It's one and the only kind. You see? This is page 83. Let us see. The name Allah is original. It is the name by which the Most Exalted named himself. It is ever identifying himself with the name because it is not other than the name. This is ism and musamma. It's very important, and it refers to the that. It refers to the that. Now, Prof. al-Attas mentioning this is very important because this discussion, as I said, has earlier been discussed, not by him alone, but remember Irsyadus Sari discussed about it, and this page 43 here, 47, 43. Bada'ul Wahi, it's 47. So this is one of it. And it's also discussed in Raniri's earlier work, like this one here, Lata'if, and it is on page 5544. It discusses about ism. You know, I don't have time to go through all this, but to show you that it is and the rest, because it talks about ma'rifah and tawhid. You want to check the English also, it's in there. And it's also in the latest work that I'm working on of Raniri, Haludil, the Ism and Mausuf. And here, just to give you a glimpse of it. Let me see. By the way, this is a dummy of it. Shukri is working on it.
This dummy.
This is the dummy. Not finished yet, but it should be finished. The draft should be finished by next week, insyaAllah. Hai Talib, jangan pada sangkamu ada pada sangka sifat dan asma itu wujud seperti i'tiqad wujudiyah yang dalalah. Jikalau ada keduanya wujud, nescaya adalah beberapa wujud tiada terkira-kira ia banyaknya. Maka yang dikmian itu sekali-kali tiada diperoleh. Dari kerana inilah kata segala arif. You see, maknanya knowers, the Sufis. As-sifah wal mausuf wahid. Yakni sifat dan empunya sifat itu suatu jua. Dan lagi kata arif, al-ism wal musamma wahid. Yakni nama dan yang empunya nama itu satu jua. O seeker, never postulate, this is my translation. Never postulate that the attributes, never postulate existence to the attributes and the names of God as the deviating wujudiyah belief. If these two were to possess existence, then there would be many other countless existences as a consequence. That shall never be the case. Hence, the knowers, the arifun, say the attribute and the attributed, they are one and the same. This is what it refers to, the name Allah. This means the attributes and the possessor are one. Furthermore, the knowers say the name and the named are one. There's a bigger discussion from this that's going to happen in my introduction. It takes me a bit of time to write, but it's very important. There's an involved discussion to that, because this is very important what Professor al-Attas is saying and what the ulama is saying concerning this name, because it's the origin of everything. Allah Ta'ala is the origin of all existences. That's what it is. So this is why here he says original. Not original Levi's. Not original. No. Not the original versus counterfeit. It means original in the very term itself. It is the origin of everything. See? So therefore it cannot be human-made. See? All right, let's move on. The name Allah, later end of that paragraph, the name Allah was revealed by the Most Exalted about himself when religion, deen, was first being revealed by him to mankind through the earliest of his prophets and messengers. See, this is what I just said, right? Allah Ta'ala revealed his name to all the prophets and messengers. Religion involves worship and adoration. It was then that the name Allah was introduced into a language, the language of Adam, the first man, and the earliest of gods and the prophets and the messenger. The communication between God and his chosen prophet, not in language or letters, but later on communicated to human being in a language that is new. That's what it is. See? But the name in earlier religion, revealed religion, like Judaism, Christianity, they were corrupted. And this is why in Judaism they have Yahweh, not Allah. They have Adonai, not Allah. They have Elohim, not Allah. And the word Elohim is a plural. That's why the name Allah has to be reintroduced again in the Quran with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Again, the words Allah,
The word.
Its original means that in all languages is Allah.
No, this is where it is. It is not. It does not belong in any languages. It is prior to human language that the name Allah has been made known to the prophets because of what he just said. Religion. You need the ilah, the object of ma'bud, the object of ma'luh, the object of worship, and that is called Allah. Right? Before that, he is Rabb. And this is why he goes through the stages here. We go through, right? The pages here. Page 84, let's see. For Adam, page 84 starts with Adam. But for Adam, it's not difficult because he was talking to a few, his wife, and they just came from heaven, they know. But what happened was after generations, and it is, if you look at the order in the Quran, Adam, Noah, Hud, Saleh. This is why he starts, the first messenger to be sent by God to a people before the flood was Prophet Noah. And this is where the beginning of the word to be reconstituted back again, the name for Allah to be reconstituted again. So this is why he says, "Oh my people, worship Allah. Do not, you do not have a true ilah." See, they have a divinity called ilah. Of course, this is recorded in the Arabic language, but they have other names. So this is why if you look at the cuneiform language, as I said to my wife, cuneiform is not a language. It's a style of writing. We do not know the language of, no. Cuneiform means something that is spoke into clay. That's cuneiform. Hieroglyphics, pictures on a wall. The language, because it has no lafaz. We don't know. That's why it's not a language. It is cuneiform writing. It's hieroglyphic writing. Alhamdulillah, Jawi tak mati. Kalau tak, Jawi writing.
Yeah. So that is lurah lah. That is considered lurah.
What?
Yang tu tadi, yang no.
No, it's not. The no is not a lurah because we do not know how they speak. We can approximate because we say this type it sounded like an R and an E, but it's not the language itself. And this is why the Rosetta Stone was quite a find in a sense that we managed to decipher hieroglyphics writing because of it. But the way to speak, wallahu alam, we can decipher the names. That's why it sounds so strange. Tutankhamen, Osiris, the god named Ra, and things like that. How to sound it, wallahu alam, we don't know. Because we don't know the grammar, because language, lugha, must have grammar. It must have tasrif, derivative. But we cannot make grammar out of hieroglyphics. We don't know. We lost them. Maybe the time of Musa, he would know. Wallahu alam. That is why, in many ways, you see, Musa alayhi salam, which is why Prof. al-Attas mentioned here, and in the Quran, Musa was featured quite extensively, really. Part of it because of this, as I was telling my wife, I remember, Musa is quite unique because he lived in a transition between two languages. He lived among the Pharaoh. In fact, Pharaoh said to him, "Alam takum walida, waqad labistum sinin." We raised you from a child and you spent years with us. Technically speaking, Moses did not speak Hebrew. His first language was the language of the Pharaohs. So how can he preach to the Hebrews when he doesn't know the language of the Hebrews? Which is why, in my humble opinion, one of the reasons why he cannot be fully accepted by the Hebrews. Because this is why he has to come up with a revelation, and that revelation is the Tur Sinai. And this is why Prof. al-Attas mentioning here. You see, the event of Tur Sinai is quite interesting. So, first we go back to Nuh. Ya qawmi, U'budullah مَا لَكُمْ مِنْ إِلَهٍ غَيْرُ. Remember, these are descriptions of an event in Arabic of the Quran, not the speech of Noah to his people. We do not know. The language is gone, all right? Until we can find proper clay cuneiform tablets that contain somehow representation of these sayings, we couldn't say anything more. This is why the Quran says that it is the نحن نقص عليك أحسن القصص بما أوحينا إليك. We reveal to you stories, but they're not stories. They are events of what happened, and we have revealed to you. So these are not stories, not hikayat, you see. Suratul Qasas, I think, or Anbiya. نحن نقص عليك أحسن القصص بما أوحينا إليك. So these stories of the prophets, they were revealed to Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. See, and because it was revealed to the prophet, it's not in a way that is given every single detail, like how long the nail of if there was a nail that Noah used to make the ship, the boat, the ark, or whatever, So, all right, that's one part. So that's one event. Then he says, this remarkable fact is proven centuries later after the flood, when the descendant of Sam, one of the eldest son of Noah, the line of the Semites, which also Arabic comes from there. So technically speaking, Arabic is a Semitic language, and the Arabs are the Semite too. Cuma they broke away, and it's very interesting, which I think many of you, including myself, it somehow, I missed the point. From our tradition, Ismail came first before Ishaq, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now you can see why Arabic is an earlier language than Hebrew. It is an older language. I remember I had a dictionary of the Bible at home. I look at the Arabic. Is the language used to understand Hebrew. I didn't know. I when I read that, I said, it's very funny. I thought Hebrew was older. But then here, Ismail was earlier. And as I remember, I was saying, and this is where we must do our part now. Most of the stories about earlier prophets, we understand them from the Bible, isn't it? Or biblical or Israeliyat. But the stories of this Prophet Muhammad SAW, pre-Islam, so to speak, the better stories should be in the Quran, but we don't tell them, right? That's the weaknesses of our scholars in the Quran. We don't talk about the story of Yunus, the story of Joseph, the story of Sulaiman, Solomon, the story of David from the Quran, the story of even Jesus from the Quran. We don't tell because we're so fixated with Rasul SAW. And this is why this whole thing becomes clouded. We get so separated, and somehow we get very uneasy when we hear stories. Easily we somehow dismiss Israeliyat. No, not necessarily, because there are parts in the Quran, and we must know from the earlier tafasir, Qurtubi, Ibn Kathir, Muqatil bin Sulaiman, and many others. But unfortunately, because we do not know much about Jewish or Christian sources, we are easily, unfortunately, do this thing called purging. Purging is, they call it tashih. So earlier tafasir by Ibn Kathir, they want to make tashih. So they want to throw out hadith that was so-called from Jewish narrators. But they have become Muslim, Macam by Wahib Munabbi, for example. They raise suspicion to it. Not necessarily. See? Not necessarily. For example, if Salman Farisi were to communicate a hadith, you don't create suspect because he's a Persian, but he's one of the closest companions of the Prophet. Just like, for example, there's a hadith narrated by Abu Sufyan, isn't it? He was one of those staunch enemies of the Prophet. Now, why don't we throw it out? Because he become a late, Muslim believer. So there is a science to this, Dato Seri. So this is why what Prof. al-Attas is doing, and this is why I think this book, it is small, but it's going to be a great book. because it's going to beckon us, younger minds, Muslim, to keep on digging and reading more. So this is really part of a very great book, you know. So the earlier Arabic prophet, which is earlier than the Hebrew prophets, are here. Professor al-Attas mentioned. After Nuh, you have Hud, and then you have Saleh, who was sent to the people of Ad and Thamud. And it says, Ya qawmi u'budullah ma lakum min ilahin ghayru. See, so you have Hud. So here, the stories about Hud and Saleh, we don't know much either. You see? These are what Professor al-Attas mentioned as Proto-Arabic. I mean, the earlier, before, because the real Arabic is after Nabi Ismail, alayhi salam. It's after Nabi Ismail. It's very fascinating because then you have a case where Ismail married the people of Jurhum in Mecca properly, and this is why the function of Ibrahim alayhi salam to place Hajar and Ismail in Mecca. So therefore, Mecca becomes the center point of what is called Lughatul Arabiya. See, Lughatul Arabiya. And you want to speak the Lugha of Arabiya, you go to the Bedouin. You go to the Bedouin because their language is so pure, it's unadulterated, which is one of the hikmah why Rasul Sallallahu, when he was small, he was raised by the Bedouin. You know, he was sent to the Bedouin. So this is why one of the things that we must look again, and not very many writings about the earlier prophets and the earlier Arabs to know how it developed. You see, the phrase "Malakum min ilahin ghairu" clearly show the fundamental difference between the conception of ilah preached by Prophet Noah and by the ancient Arab prophets, and the conception of ilah understood and practiced by the idolaters in the time of Noah and the ancient Arab prophets, carried on to the time of Jahiliyyah, when the pagan Arab ilah was finally overthrown by the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So they have this idea of divinity. I'm sorry to say, I do not want to sound derogatory. We live among us, there are some non-Muslim. They have their conception of divinity, Tuhan, you know. But we go by ground zero Tuhan. Okay lah, but we know in our hearts, their Tuhan is not the same as our Tuhan. But we don't go about saying, and this is why some of them might felt very uneasy when we say them kafir. But it's a right term, you know. Just like when the Jews refer to us as Gentiles, you know. But it may be sensitive now. For example, the term like Tanjung Keling is already known because there is a historical term to it, you know, but we're not going to go into it. So the same way here, slowly the process of sort of purifying the conception of divinity has taken place. First, it's trying to say your God is not the same. This is why finally, Kul ya ayyuhal kafirun. You know, kafirun actually is a less derogatory term than unbeliever, you know. They're not entirely unbeliever. Kafirun means to cover the truth. You have halfway. You know God, but you do not go the true God. That's why kafir, you cover it up because you have the idea of believing in God. Lakum dinukum waliyadin. Unto us, you know, our religion, unto yours, your religion. Fine, you know. But the conception of God must be clear. And so this is why we are very particular when people try to make use of the name Allah in their Bible because they refer to Allah also to Jesus. If they refer to the Rabb, then there's a problem because we don't believe in God being a father to another creature, you know. So we therefore become corrupting of the language, Dato Sri. We corrupt language, therefore we corrupt meaning, therefore we corrupt the lugha, the lisan, and the kalima. And we cannot be party to that. That's the only thing that we are uneasy with, you know. We're not saying not to say that, yeah, you can use it, but the point is you're corrupting language, you know. As the way, for example, in science, you don't just willy-nilly add, you know, an alpha anywhere you like, or a Planck constant. It doesn't work. Schrodinger equation wouldn't work, you know. Yeah. E is equal to mc squared. You throw the E, You put something else. You throw the sea, you put something else. It doesn't work. You cannot do that. So we talk about being human, scientific language to advance knowledge, but you are adding to the corruption of language by not using it purely. And this is what it is. Of course, in translation, that happens. But then, in the process of trying to say, making it more clear, then we have to attempt to make it more clear, isn't it? But for us, this word has been used, and this is what it is. So, let's go to the next page. 86. Everything let's say, let's start with that sentence before. In contrast, the ilah of the idolaters and the pagan Arabs was a plurality, because we believe in Tuhan yang Esa, okay? Tauhid. Everything was an object of worship, ma'bud, angel, animal, plant, stone, fire, sun, moon, star, etc., etc. Everything. You see, this is the concept of ilah, because you attribute. This is, remember here, al-ism and musamma, as-sifa wal mawsuf. Ism, musamma, the name and the named. Sifa, attribute and the attributed. So there's a name, a star, but you attribute it as God, sun, the God Ra. You know. That's why the name Allah is not human attribute, because divinity is an attribute. All right, but we have they had masculine and feminine gender. This is a reflection of the verse just now. Zakaru wal untha. Among the gods worshipped, the range of application of their ilah was mundane, meaning all the day is still mundane from this world, from this creation. This is what is called earlier, Dato said, the name Allah is original, because it is beyond this creation, beyond this alam. It's not mundane. So they knew
Ilah is Tuhan lah.
Ilah is Tuhan, yeah.
Allah is specific.
Allah is specific, yeah. It's why Allah is higher. In fact, Ilah is it's only an aspect of it.
Kalau orang Arab kata wallahi, is that intentionally to God or
No.
Kalau orang Arab, when they talk to each other,
yeah, there is qism, there is what is swearing. Meaning we have that bila some of our higher people invested with authority, like the agong and the ministers, they say wallah, wabillah, watallahi. So wallah is the lowest degree of swearing, and then wabillahi, and then finally watallahi. So that is wow with Allah, the name. So they are swearing by the name of Allah, not God, but the name itself. So, which is the very that. And this is what that swearing is very, very heavy, Dato Seri. And kita in Malay, we become demi Allah. Demi Allah, you know? In Malay.
Some Arab kalau kita jumpa, kita jumpa perkataan Allah ni, they use it very casually.
Itu jadi kalam. Itu jadi kalam, you see?
Yalla. Kalau pergi Mekah pun yalla.
Anyway, so they acknowledge that Allah created the heavens, because there is a verse, you know, la yakulunna Allah, you know. When you ask them who created that, la yakulunna Allah. But other divinities, they associate other divinities. So, and subjected the sun and the moon to his law, al-Ankabut, and he sends down the rain from the sky, and it gives life on earth, and its death. You know, this is the attribute of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. But they did not worship him as God, no, Allah. See, they have other. Sebab tu, some of them would say, we have this as intermediaries. See. We have intermediaries to worship Allah, you know. Some people who worship what we call idol worshippers, they worship the real Allah, God, the real God, but these are intermediaries. No, we go beyond that too. We do not accept that. Okay, that is Islam. So it is said that the ancestors of the pagan Arabs, the Ad, the Thamud, the Madian, by all the by the Arab prophets of antiquity, Hud, Saleh, and Shu'aib. We must learn this, all right? In fact, in the book I brought last time, the Nuwairis, Nihayatul Arab fil Funun wal Adab, it has a list of the names of the prophet according to their time period, their sequence. So we should learn again about this story. It's fascinating, you know. And this is the book that I brought last time, the pre-Arabian prophets. You can get that book from Nur Inai bookshops. Very good book, really. For example, one of the ancient prophets of Arabia, yeah. And it mentions Prophet Idris was among the early ones who started writing, you know. Fascinating. But it's lost by now, you know. For example, Dawood's Psalms of David, we don't have it now in what form it was written. So they were told to worship Allah alone because they do not have among any of their gods a true ilah other than him. And this is the story of the prophets trying to sort of purifying the object of worship. So this is why it goes, Malakum min ilahin ghairu. See? So this is the stages where Prof. al-Attas is trying to bring the discussion, and it's mentioned there in the Quran. He has tried to sort of summarize this because in the Quran it's being put in several places. We may not be able to follow it, really. So in the comment of Ism Musamma, there's a big discussion about it, but I don't think I want to discuss that because I will lose you. This is very detailed Arabic discussion, but if you like, you can read it, right? Cuma one thing, the next page is 89. Very interesting to be understood. What later on, in fact, in modern philosophy became a problem. The second paragraph, because there is a discussion about Ash'ari Mutakallimun. I don't want to go into that, that's too detailed. Every attribute is a reality and not something existing outside in the mind that describes, according to its own intrinsic meaning, a special aspect or particular form of God. Now, this is problematic, I understand, right? What it means is this. There's a problem of language and reality. Dato Seri tanya tadi, kalam tu apa? What is kalam? What is lugha? What is lisan? Remember, for students of Qasis, they often hear this. Professor al-Attas says, language reflects ontology, right? For many of you may find it very difficult. What the heck is ontology? Ontology is a very fancy word, just to say language reflects reality. Because there's a problem in modern philosophy. Started with the empiricists. And this is why I brought among the great so-called prophets of empiricism in the West, Bertrand Russell and A.J. Ayer. A.J. Ayer wrote a book called Language, Truth, and Logic. Language, we all know, language is the as I said, systematic, analytical, structural form of a spoken thing, isn't it? That's language. Now, if language is not reflecting reality, like coding, like mathematics, actually mathematics has no grammar. There's no grammar. If you use topology, there's a certain style, habis, you know. Algebra, you know. Trigonometry, topology, calculus. They're different kalam of language of mathematics. They do not reflect reality. Therefore, they do not reflect ontology. Although, you know, as I said, mathematicians, because they live in an alternate universe, for them, equations are representation of reality in their own mind. But it's not something mental. It is, in a way, real. It's another discussion, which involves a very high-level discussion I do not want to get here. You know, it's part of this book later on, but I cannot even discuss here. So, this is what Prophet al-Attas is saying here. The attribute is a reality, because the attribute that Allah Ta'ala attribute himself must be real. It cannot be just words, sammaytumuha. No. So that's why, what about Rahman, Rahim, Al-Malikul Quddus, Salam, Mu'minun, Muhaiminun, Azizul Jabbar? These are all attributes, but they're names. And they're real. But then, do you have many attributes, meaning many names? There's so many? No. This is why the unity, the oneness of Allah Ta'ala is never compromised. Although their attributes, they're real, but because they're real, that we can see their counterpart in this. And this is what Prophet al-Attas mentions here. Among the attributes that we can see here in this life, in this mundane life, knowledge, life, existence. Now, existence, actually all these things, you don't see, but you see the effect. For example, language, you don't see language, you hear language. You see language being written. But language in itself, you don't know. Because it comes from the spirit, the qalb, betul tak?
So, reality cakap Melayu apa?
Kita guna bahasa Arab, hakikat.
Hakikat. Hakikat bukan
In fact, orang dah cuba. People have changed it. Kan? Very rarely people use hakikat nowadays for reality.
Kenyataan lah.
Kenyataan.
The reality is...
Which is wrong. Because kenyataan is only seeing the zahir aspect. But the hakikat has the batin and the zahir aspect. And this is why kenyataan becomes kenyataan rasmi. Proclamation. Statement, you see? Just to make clear what is intended. So it becomes kenyataan. So this is why it's very important. So the attributes of Allah Ta'ala, all essential attributes, sifatu dhatiyah, which become manifest in the external world, are life, knowledge, power, will, speech, hearing, and sight. This is why we have that too. And some creatures don't possess that. Like table is a creature, but doesn't possess life, doesn't possess knowledge. They only possess one thing, zahir existence. It's real. Don't say it's not real, although you can burn this to ashes, but it's still, I lupa lah, the table that was inherited by great-great-grandfather, somebody burnt it. It's real. So, these attributes subsist from eternity in and by the essence, Zat Allah, the essence of Allah Ta'ala that maintains this. And this is why something very important, all right? As I said, language, I want to explain furthermore about language, truth, and logic. Because language is a human-made kind of communication. For Bertrand Russell and AJA, we have a problem. Does language reflect reality? That's why reality is the thing outside. But to reflect it truly, you have to use truth. And how to measure truth? Logic. So mathematicians would just love it. Yay, this is my world. And this is what Ghazali wrote, Qistas Mustaqim, Al-Mihakun Nazar. Because our scholars talked about this. We all know about this. We have solved the problem. Cuma Dato Seri, as I said in earlier meetings, there's this language separation among the traditionally trained ulama, Arabic, Persian, Urdu, Jawi, and with some of us, or many of us who are Western educated, more at home with English and French and German. So we cannot come to the same level of discussion. But Ghazali has talked about it long time ago. And many of these problems, that we so-called, we think the West is starting to analyze and solve them. No, our scholars have solved them. The problem is, there are ulama among us who are experts in this, but they cannot communicate because they use the heavily Arabic term. I know this because I'm writing this thing now in Malay. And it's very difficult for me to communicate. I know what it is in Malay, but the language that I write will be very difficult for people to understand. But they just have to bear with it, Otherwise, they lose the proper Malay language. So it is very fascinating. And this is why I think this is going to be a very great book later on, So, We are on page. Yeah, I want to go page. How much time do I have to see? Now I want to go to page 91. As I said, why Musa alayhi salam, Moses was configured properly here. It's very interesting here because the nature of revelation itself. Because people might think that it's too spiritual, that it's a detached experience, too spiritual that the prophets have an outer body experience or something. This is what Professor al-Attas is trying to explain. Musa saw the fire in the direction of Mount Tur. When he came to it, a voice was heard from the right bank of the valley and the hallowed ground, the tree. He heard, Ya Musa, inni anallah Rabbul Alamin. So this is the first stage. Anallah Rabbul Alamin. I am Allah, Lord of the worlds. And then, Ya Musa, innahu anallahu al-azizul hakim. And then, Ya Musa, inni ana rabbuka. And then, inni anallahu la ilaha illa ana. So this is the process of purifying. So this is why can you imagine how angry Moses, when he came down to Mount Sinai and saw the Jews, the Israelites, so to speak, or the Hebrews, I should say properly, they make a representation for an object of worship, isn't it? He has been going through, and this, why? Because the Egyptians live with the Romans, and they have objects of worship. So the Hebrews at that time want something like that too. See? In one of the episodes, this is why, and here Prof. al-Attas mentioned, Musa says, I want to see God jahratan, because they are leading to that, this is, so we have to have, one tawheed and show me jahratan. And then Allah Ta'ala say, look at the mountain. If you can see, remain standing, then you can see me, otherwise no. So this is where Prof. al-Attas was saying, this is why the experience of revelation is physical, and it did not require the detachment of the spirit, the roh from the body. It is happening just like the Prophet. When the first revelation came to him, he was in his human form. He did not go through some kind of heavy meditation or whatever, detachment, like, what other tradition would say of you need to have high meditation, escape from the world and things like that. No. So this is what it is, So let's look at that. I have chosen you. Listen then to the revelation. This is Taha. I am Allah, there's no God but I. So serve me, and establish regular prayers. So the most important historic call of the most exalted, identifying himself as Allah to Prophet Musa, is revealed in the Quran in 3 surahs. So this is the story, goes on and goes on. So Allah is also a name considered as an attribute, but not just any attribute, but as an attribute of the essence that gathers together all the other attributes in perfection. Okay? This is what it is. And this is why, let me see. On page 92, 93, at the end of it, consider as itself the word Allah is unique. In the call of the most exalted, identifying him as Allah, he is referred to by most supreme designation of distinction, Rabbul Alameen. Okay, and he is Azizul Hakim. And then Ana Rabbul Alameen. This is page 93. Ana Rabbuka. And finally, Ana La ilaha illa Ana, passing from Rabbaniyah to Ilahiyah. So this is why the first stage of the covenant, Professor al-Attas started out, Alastu bi Rabbikum. There is what is called Rabbaniyah aspect. And finally, La ilaha illa Ana. There is no other God but me. So the ilah now becomes the divinity for worship, because earlier civilization, earlier peoples were worshipping divinities, but not Allah as one of divinity to be worshipped. Okay, this is what it is. So again, he concludes, we already said that the name Allah did not originate from any language, And that name Allah was revealed by the Most Exalted about Himself when religion was first revealed to mankind. And this is why, the first revelation, revelation of religion, yang alastu bi rabbikum, that was also the meaning of awwaluddin ma'rifatullah. People might mistake, and I mentioned in my syarah to the meaning and experience of happiness in Islam, because that's what it means. Awwaluddin ma'rifatullah. The very first requirement of religion is the knowledge of Allah Ta'ala. So this is why it happens twice. Once, alastu bi rabbikum, and the other for the prophets with the name Allah. So he specifically identified himself. All right? So this is what Professor al-Attas is saying here. We also stated much earlier in our discourse about religion, from the beginning of revelation, religion was revealed to the prophets in stages of formation and completion according to prevailing historical circumstance and the time and the place in which the prophets lived. Since the time of Noah, religion was revealed initially in the rudimentary form, which was gradually evolved from the millah of the prophets to the millah of Ibrahim, from millah Ibrahim to millah Musa, from millah Musa, and then we might say millah Isa, and then after that, millah Muhammad. And then millah Muhammad transformed as a consummate deen, wa raditu lakumul Islam madina. That's the actual stamping of it, Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati wa raditu lakumul Islam madina. So that's it, stamp. It's the stamp of approval because it has all the ingredients of a proper religion. It has its own final book, form, completed, revelation. It has its own final form of worship, completed, everything. The form of worship. That's why when they try to translate the word Islam as submission, it's not submission, but it is the name of religion. The religion of the prophets on the time of Noah, then that of Ibrahim, then of Musa, to Isa, only to carry out what Allah has instructed them to do, to form an upright religion for their own peoples in their respective languages in order to realize the obligatory legal and moral injunctions contained in the core of their religion. So, لِكُلٍّ شِرْعَةٍ وَمِنْهَاجًا. To everyone there is a way and there's a path, and that way is basically Sharia, legal injunctions. And this is why Isa says, Nabi Isa, remember, musaddiqan lima bayna yadayya, and that's just trying to verify the truth of what is between my hands, meaning the Torah. Wa mubashiran bi rasulin ya'ti min ba'di ismuhu Ahmad, and to give you glad tidings of a coming of another prophet after me. His name is Muhammad. So this is what it is, the covenants of the prophet. So the name Allah, the substance of the core of religion, was introduced into human language when religion was revealed to the prophets here on earth for the purpose of worship and adoration. But for the upright religion, Dinan Qayyiman of the prophets in the form of the Millah, the substance of the core, after thousands of years of evolvement from the time of Noah to that of Isa, was not yet defined in a set of words, comprehensive and ambiguous as the formula La ilaha illallah. There is no formula like this. Maknanya, Dato' Sri, it has not evolved from kalam. It has not entered the kalam of the people. That's why this La ilaha illallah is only peculiarly Arabic Quran. Not Arabic of the people, but Quranic Arabic. It's in the Quran, the formula. See? Because it's revealed. And then this definition, therefore, of monotheism was reserved by the Most Exalted for his last prophet. The last religion. The true monotheism. The true Dinul Tawheed. Right? So this is called Dinul Haq, to make manifest. لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ قُلِّ. لِيُظْهِرَهُ ada dua makna. There are two meanings, because Arabic is like that. لِيُظْهِرَهُ means to take over, But لِيُظْهِرَ, to make it so clear. So this is what I think Professor al-Attas is trying to make clear. That now the mission of the Prophet is now so clearly. So do not say Islam is submission. Islam is the only religion brought by the last Prophet. And the name Allah has been carried out by earlier prophets, but they were corrupted, and finally it is encapsulated, strung in a formula called La ilaha illallah in the Quran also by the last prophet. So that's why we cannot compromise the integrity, the purity of Islam and the name Allah. See? This is why you can see, Dato Sri, I can now sense how angry he is. He's like angry of Moses coming down. People do these things, you know?
Okay.
How you do this into the name Allah? That's why I know, I think my wife and I, because we often visit him, and he keeps saying this, you know? Now I can sense the anger that he has. Why are you doing this to Islam? Why are you doing this to a La ilaha illallah? And this is why he said, you know, some esteemed, highly educated Muslim, you call that, you do this. Because the perversion, the corruption of religion is done by those who are in the religion themselves. And this is what it is, you know. And this is why Prof. al-Attas is hitting them squarely, meaning trying to raise. So the way of communication, page 95. Oh, by the way, just before that, the voice of God spoken to Prophet Musa. This is why now you can see perhaps Musa is called Kalamullah. God spoke to him. وَكَلَّمَ اللَّهُ مُوسَى تَكْلِيمًا. In fact, this is very fascinating. I was discussing with Dr. Hilmi some time ago. Only Musa alayhi salam, that Allah Ta'ala has raised him to the point, وَكَلَّمَ اللَّهُ مُوسَى تَكْلِيمًا. God spoke to him, not any other prophets.
What about during Isra Miraj?
Itu lain. That's wahyu. That's why the kalam is a different thing. So wahyu is a communication. So partly I think I was trying to explain, partly because as I said, Musa was coming from two language. He was coming from the Pharaonic language. He was quite alien to Hebrew. So I think what Allah Ta'ala was trying to say, وَكَلَّمَ اللَّهُ مُوسَى تَكْلِيمًا, he is trying to actually shape the qalb of the Prophet Musa in order to eventually being able to speak to the Hebrews in their language. Because the language of revelation for Musa was not Pharaonic. It was language of the Hebrews. So he has to so-called converse with him in a very aggressive manner. Because in Arabic we know, kalau it is in sirah, wazan yang kedua ni, intensive. Taklima, you know. So it was directed to his heart, to his qalb, the organ of spiritual cognition that has a power of impulse to apply its impelling force suddenly to the mind. This is how revelation works, Dato Sri. It goes to the qalb, as it says here, the impulse, it impels the qalb, the qalb impels the intellect, and eventually suddenly on the mind to produce action. In this case, action began with the agitation in the internal auditory senses, affecting the external organs of hearing to function so that the Prophet, quote unquote, heard and paid attention to what the voice was saying in order to act accordingly. So in the Quran, God says that it is not for mortal bashar that God should speak to him directly, but by way of wahi, or by way of a veil, you see? And then in this context between God and man, wahi is a revelation or sudden inspiration from God to the heart and the mind, fu'ad of man to produce in man the action intended. So what is the fu'ad? When the qalb and the aqal works together, you have the fu'ad. And this is why the word fa'idah comes from that. See? Ma nuthabbitu bihi fu'adak, you know, to make your fu'ad firm. So the way of communication of wahi is not only to man, but also to animals, I said this previously, and to every one of the heavens, to every one of all the heavens, each for its own separate laws and command. So this is how Allah Ta'ala maintains the universe. He talks to them, but they are not revelation like, you know, you have to command them, or you have to follow the command. So in the case of Musa on the mount, the voice says he heard, was a verbal wahyu from behind the veil. He heard, you know. So that's why it goes to the qalb, so, and then the auditory. So that's why the Prophet in this book, Bad'u Wahi, the Prophet hears wahi like ringing in the ear, it goes to his qalb. But that's because it happens in the physical form. So you must, it's just like, I'm sorry to say, it's not like it, but when you are agitated, there's some physical association to it, physical activity associated with it. So this is what it is. So the voice heard as a verbal wahyu from behind the veil, from the tree on fire, speaking to him in a way of communication from a vertical, not horizontal level of relationship. It is beyond the scope of grammar to attempt a ruling about the voice in this case. As I said, this revelation is beyond grammar. So, because grammar operates at the horizontal, not vertical level of communication, its ruling that the voice is lafaz is a mistake. So this is why what is heard is a lafaz? No, because it's something worked from the qalb to the akal and to the, so it doesn't work the other way around because it's not human. Whereas in this case, the voice did not say in the name of Allah. It says, I am God, Ana Allah, This was declared with the emphasis, Inni ana Allah, la ilaha illa ana, So with regard to the call of the most exalted of to the Prophet Musa on the Mount, we said that the call has dual meaning. Personal to Musa, all right? And the rest of it. The last one I want to read before the conclusion is page 97, 98. But here's the point, as I said earlier, so I think I should read this part before we conclude. On the account of the Prophet Musa, 96, the last paragraph. Yeah. On account of Prophet Musa's experience of a verbal wahy from behind a veil described in the Quran in detail, clearly shows that while the experience of spiritual, his body remained physically intact as body. It was spiritual because the experience was directed his call. The organ of spiritual cognition that has the power of impulse, of applying an impelling force suddenly on the mind, the akal, to produce action, showing that the wahi from behind a veil is not only verbal but visual as well. The qalb working together with the intellect, this is called the fu'ad, as I said earlier. In the Quran, there are only two instances in which a similar verbal and visual wahyu from behind a veil is described. One, Moses referred to above, and the other, Rasul Sallallahu in his journey, Al-Isra wal Mi'raj, to the Sidratul Muntaha. Both the night journey, Isra, and the Mi'raj were taken to be bodily events. And this is what Prophet is trying to answer, whether Isra and Mi'raj is bodily, physical or not. And he says it is physical. Okay, it seems that the only evidence to prove the bodily events was to use the Quran itself. Because the term, the Quran used abdun and the word basar. Abdun means he is in his physical form, Subhanalladhi asra bi abdihi laylam min al-masjid al-aqsa min al-masjid al-harami ila al-masjid al-aqsa allati barakna hawlahu. So the word abdun, as I said, this is the lafaz and this is the kalam and this is the lugha. Abdun in Arabic, it refers to a person but with a body. Otherwise, it's not abdun. Okay? But this purely linguistic evidence, one for the night journey and one for the ascension, lacked completeness and was therefore inconclusive. Whereas the evidence represents of Prophet Moses' case described in the Quran, showing clearly the event of his spiritual experience on the mount occurring while his bodily state of being remained intact. Indeed, an observant reader of the descriptive passages of the Quran can actually see the Prophet Musa in his bodily state. Not only that, the testimony of the voice of God, he himself sees Moses bodily. Therefore, our evidence to prove a bodily night journey and ascension of the Prophet Muhammad SAW based on the precise similarity and priority of the bodily spiritual experience in the case of Prophet Musa is complete and conclusive. This means that the way of wahyu from behind a veil is that it needs a bodily recipient whose body, while experiencing a spiritual event, remains intact. In the case of the Holy Prophet, his body has to go under a night journey and then ascension. Hence, he needs a steed, the burak, the transport of lightning speed, to transport him in the night journey and the ascension to the Sidratul Muntaha of the father's, Qaba Kausaini or Adna. So that's how Prof. al-Attas closes this book, So every praise to Allah, to whom all praise is due. We have now come to the end of our discourse. We beseech God to forgive us where we slip and err, to grant us succor and His guidance in correctly understanding His words and His signs and symbols, whose ultimate meanings He alone knows best. Wallahu a'lam bis-shawab. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin. Salatu wassalam syafi'il anbiya wa mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa tabi'in lahum bi ihsanin ila yaumil. So alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, we have completed 4 series, a series of 4 discussion on this book. I think on top of 2 lectures given by Professor Naquib al-Attas himself. During the second lecture he gave, he mentioned about the study Quran, where the words Islam was not used, it was used submission. And the words Allah was translated as God. So I think intellectually, when we disagree with something, people like Syed Naquib and his disciple, students and peers normally put forward our thought in this manner, writing on books. Yeah, kita tak shout here and there, pergi demonstration, there's different level of people. Yeah, because this is going to be eternal, I think. People can still refer to this. And this is the first time I heard about this discussion many years ago when he started talking about Islam. Apa yang buku nipis tu?
The foundation of concept of religion, foundation of ethics and morality.
So it was briefly mentioned about the meaning of Islam, religion and whatnot. That's very important. But this is very detailed. Therefore, when I read this book a few times, I think I need guidance, because you need philosophical background to understand this. And this is a summary of many of his books, other books. If you start with this book, you can understand, means that you'll be able to understand others. If you cannot understand this, go back to the books. And therefore, before we start discussing this book, I would just want to introduce the Malay version of his ideas and thinking. Himpunan Risalah, that he wrote many years ago, but recently published by
Ifim and Cassis.
That was later, much later. It's about 30 years later.
It's a collections of his writings. In Malay.
In Malay. And this was originally very, very 30 years before it was published, 20 years. So if you want to follow his thought in understanding all this in Malay, I think it's very important for us to read this. So I propose to Prof. Zaini, probably you can have 3 series of discussion on this book starting from December 16. So our Malay readers and followers will be able to understand the Malay side of the thinking of Professor Naquib. Sometimes it's very difficult to understand in Malay. When you read in English and you find words that you cannot easily translate. Say, for example, reality. Reality is kenyataan. But it's hakikat. There's a keywords that sometimes people corrupt in translation. So I open this session for discussion. If you like to ask something, thank you for everyone. Dato, Kamil.
Assalamualaikum. Saya tertarik bila Prof. Zaini cakap tadi tentang walaupun dalam Quran cerita-cerita bagi Nabi-Nabi yang lain banyak, in fact Nabi Musa especially, Nabi Musa disebut lebih daripada 100 kali.
Banyak.
Nabi Muhammad berapa kali? 4 je saya rasa. Tak sampai 10 pun. Saya difahamkan lah. Jadi moving forward macam mana? Maknanya sekarang ni kita lebih tumpuan lebih pada sirah tentang hikayat Nabi Muhammad saja. Tapi saya nampak inilah satu implikasi. Apabila kita cuma tahu kisah Nabi kita saja, jadi kita tak boleh, bila kita nak discuss dengan rakan-rakan daripada agama lain, susah sebab kita tak tahu where they coming from. Pengalaman saya sendiri masa September 11 dulu, kawan-kawan saya ramai yang Yahudi apa semua. Jadi bila dia tanya kita nak bersembang tu, saya tak boleh sebab tak tahu. Sampai terpaksa saya beli satu buku, tebal lah kuat ni, Culture of Jews. Jadi dia menceritakan daripada asal dulu dan juga zaman masa Islam sampai Nabi, kelahiran Nabi tu. Jadi mungkin pendekatan yang kita harus ambil ialah, okey, kita boleh bercakap tentang Nabi Muhammad apa, tapi pada masa yang sama kita juga kena bagi pendedahan kepada umat Islam apa yang dalam Quran tu tentang
umat-umat lain terdahulu.
Betul. Kita tak boleh bincang.
Thank you. Saya nak tambah. I was told out of 25 Rasul yang wajib itu tu 60% adalah Jews. So therefore Jews are so proud to say that the history of Muslim base started the history of Jews. Jadi masa perang-perang ni semua keluar lah kan. Rabai sana cakap, Rabai sini cakap. Jadi saya fikir macam kita ni tak belajar tentang orang tau. Kita belajar tentang Muhammad SAW aja. Padahal wajib tahu tu 25 Rasul.
Ya, betul.
Yang kita tahu hanya ada dalam Quran tu. Jadi Nabi Nuh dengan banjirnya, Nabi Saleh dengan untanya, itu je yang kita tahu. So please can you elaborate, because a number of pages I found that Professor al-Attas narrated sequence of prophets for us to understand. Please.
Oh, well, there are many aspects to this. There is that part of course, to live as a Muslim, we just need to know the story of Rasul Sallam, to live according to his Sunnah. But in order to have a better appreciation of our religion, because it is not, as it said, come out in the vacuum. So we must know the development of it in history. That's why classes at CASIS, Dr. Ilmi, we talked about the period called the late antiquity, picking it up from the fall of decline and fall of the Roman Empire, and we mentioned a little bit and make references to books. But I think I would agree, because we need to have a civilizational approach to the study of religion. Do not make it. We have to maintain religion as the part of the Sharia, the Shari'atan wa minhaja. But we also need to expand this historical context to it, to make it even more living, a living legacy. As Dato Seri mentioning, the name Dato Seri may be appropriated as a Jewish prophet, but not necessarily, because they belong to because we don't call them Jewish prophet per se. Because if they were to claim that this all coming from Ibrahim, and Ibrahim, as it is described in the Quran, ma kana Ibrahimu Yahudiyan aw Nasraniyan walakin kana Musliman Hanifan. So but we need to talk about earlier prophets study, like for the Qawm of Ad and Thamud, the Saleh, Hud. We need to talk about that too. As I said earlier, when we talk about the prophets, always we go to, as you said, the Israelite prophets. No, because the part of the Proto-Arab, and remember, as mentioned here, the Arabic civilization, the Proto-Arabs, they were earlier than the Hebrews, because Ismail was first before Ishaq.
Ismail, and then he was spoken. He speaks
by birth. Yeah, Ismail spoke Arabic. Yeah, so his predecessors too, because the people around him are the people of Madah in Saleh, So that's the area that we must know. And there were prophets that were sent to them before that. But betul lah, Dato' Kamil, that we must. It's not. I don't know how to do it, but we do a little bit. It's a very specialized kind of area because we don't have that many experts yet, unfortunately. Even if you ask students who are studying in Al-Azhar, there are not many people who become experts on tafasir of earlier prophets, isn't it? What's his name? Khairul Anwar. Sorry, yeah, he studied in Al-Azhar. There are not many people who become experts in this so-called ancient prophets. there are stories about them, but as I said, that book, Ancient Prophets of Arabia, could be a starting point. Really, I think it's very good. And in fact, if there is a fund to translate that into Malay, I think that would be very useful, Dato' Sri.
Siapa yang tulis?
Mustafa Badawi.
Aduh, siapa dia?
Ah, he's a very good author and a very well-known authority. Mustafa Badawi.
Macam Dato' Sri Zaini cakap, bila kita translate tu kadang kita lost the meaning kan. Tapi pada masa sama saya rasa usaha menterjemah dalam bahasa Melayu ni kena diteruskan. Sebab
ya.
itu masa sebelum majlis kita dengan Profesor Syed Naquib tu adalah saya pergi dekat luar, dekat kedai-kedai buku. Ada pelajar-pelajar lah dia duduk itu, dia pegang buku tu, dia kata, Melayu, bahasa Melayu ada tak? Bahasa Melayu ada. Ni susah nak faham. Jadi mungkin buat bagi inilah yang ada masalah peringkat awal tu.
Betul.
But over the years, lepas tu dia boleh lah kan.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's a good suggestion too. But it has to be with a commentary lah. But slowly it takes a long time. Yeah.
Ada siapa lagi yang tanya?
Nak tambah ke?
Sila Dr. Hayati.
Okay.
Ya. No. Not. Otherwise not captured.
Assalamualaikum. I'm very interested in the last part of this book when Professor Syed Naquib used the word God. We beseech God instead of Allah. Why do you think that is?
As he says, because we are God now in terms of speech and lisan, you see, and he does not want to sort of make it a bit too restrictive. So for all who reads this book, we beseech God. Macam lah, in Malay, kita minta doa dengan Tuhan. But we mean Allah SWT. Yeah. That's why he always been saying, he said, people must understand, when we say God, we refer to Allah SWT. We don't refer to the original conception of the word God from the German, G-O-T-T. And we don't mean Jesus. So itu maksud dia. So that's why he says here, at the very beginning, he says, this is a book of discourse among my fellow Muslim believers, he says it. Kan? I think at the very beginning. Dekat preface kan?
Second.
Yeah, this book is written a discourse with my fellow believers of Muslim, intended for those discernment among my friends and students, familiar with my writings and my method of reasoning. So you must be familiar because he speaks English all the time. So when he says God, that's what he means.
Prof, then can you go to acknowledgements? I think something that I
Like
would like to
maybe,
understand.
Can you, ask. I don't know.
Why it's the first time he talked about himself in a book. I'm 92 years of age and I have been disabled too.
I think Prof. al-Attas is very particular about these things because he believes in acknowledgement and giving rights where it is due. So he wants to recognize and to acknowledge people most important in his lives, I think, Dato' Sri. And those have been very instrumental in part of his later lives. So talks about his wife, Dato' Syed Ali, Taufiq al-Attas, Faiza, Shifa, Syed Hadar, and then Dr. Roslan, who has been very, committed to him, very close companion for many, many years now. Since I think since the takeover of Istat, if I'm not mistaken, 2003. Him and Dr. Nizam was helping because all of us have other engagement. So Dr. Roslan has been his close disciple in the sense that whatever he needs in terms of typing, because Dr. Roslan sees him almost every day, but now, weekly, twice or three times, or at any moment's notice. In the writing of this book, for anyone who knows how Professor al-Attas works, he writes longhand on a piece of foolscap paper. He writes on foolscap paper. I don't know where.
Old foolscap.
No,
Old one, the longer one.
Yeah, the long.
Ballpoint or fountain pen?
He writes in ballpoint. There are some notes he would write in pencil, because sometimes he would cross it out. And Roslan was saying sometimes the whole page has to be, redo. He would rewrite the whole thing again, because he writes it and leave it, he thinks about it, and then he would
Revisit.
revisit, review, and edit it, change, and then Roslan would type it up, print, and then sometimes the difficulty is, I think the way his mind works, because some people, they work with a mental picture. So if the foolscap ends with a certain word, sometimes his mind also hoping typewritten it should end with that too, but it doesn't work like that in computers. I remember the first, when I was working with him also, it was difficult because Prof, then I have to explain to Professor al-Attas, when we do it with computers, it has to do with the kerning of the letters. Because in the older days of printing, you use blocks. The standard spacing. So you know how to frame, and he's used to it with us printing. So he knows a page can take how many words, how many letters for that matter. So he knows how to end. It's the old style of writing. You said the word intaha. So with the new computer, because I know I made some things for him. He started using computers. I was the first one to introduce in computers. He was not very happy. Why do you change it? I said, I cannot do it. This is computers. Manual, you can do things, because his mind is like a khatpat. Khatpat, you can elongate stuff, you can constrict stuff. But computers, you cannot do that. Even if you do it, it's certain, things just beyond. So
I guess the next book after this book will be how to read Al-Attas.
I don't know.
I think I can understand that this para is equal to one page of
Yeah. Handwriting. Yeah.
handwriting. Yeah, this one. So you can see that is I can read. That's how you.
Yeah, and he's very appreciative of the ambassador of Turkey, Marwa. What's his name? Marwa.
Former.
The former ambassador, Marwa. Every month, Dr. Roslan would drive him, or Dr. Roslan now drives him to her home, and she would host several students and several gentlemen from the embassy to listen to, I think, basically Islam and secularism and other writings. So
Yeah.
that was when he was a bit strong. Now he's a bit infirm.
Yeah.
And the last, he would list his list of students. Interesting.
Questions? So we are going to close the chapter of the book. So we're going to a new book. Kalau ada apa-apa nak tanya lagi, ada ni dalam Facebook ada. Orang tanya. Yeah. Berapa ribu lah. Normally we will be able, the first day tu kita boleh dapat dalam 1,500. Besok hari Ahad ada 2,000 lagi, 3,000 lagi.
By the way, Shukri, do we still have this book available, or is it?
All right, come. This book is available in Kinokuniya. I've seen that still available. Tapi Shukri is going to print in Jawi. Yeah.
This one himpunan.
Himpunan Risalah, okay. Risalah untuk kaum muslimin, ya. So akan ada dalam bahasa dalam tulisan Jawi lah. Bagus juga kita baca Jawi sekali. Yeah. So it's very interesting. Yeah, Dato' Sabirin.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ustaz Zaini. Saya jangan cakap, tapi tak saya cakap daripada saya punya curiosity lah. Saya kenal Syed Naquib daripada nama dia ni. Masa sekolah rendah lagi.
Oh.
Di hujung tahun 60-an. Ketika itu dia ni celebrated.
Yeah.
Dia selalu keluar dalam talk khabar, polemik kan, umpamanya isu poligami. Siapa tentang poligami ni kurang ajar, dia kata dia berdebat dengan Marian Yusof. Dulu kan, awal 70-an. Dia memang celebrated lah. Dan kita yang di kampung-kampung baca talk khabar pun tahu Syed Naquib al-Attas ni. Kan? Dan kepakaran dia. Jadi bila kita bertambah umur masuk universiti, kenal lah sebab berguru lah. Saya guru di UAE setahun. setiap malam Jumaat dulu di
Oh.
UAE. Daripada Kulitur Razak. Jadi Ustaz alumni UAE, Ustaz Aslam awak. Dan kita tahu cara disiplin dia, gaya dia, dia punya adab masa mengajar, pernah berlaku pertengkaran yang hebat dengan orang Arab sebagainya. Kemudian melihatlah dia sebut Arab ni bukan who are you, what are you. Kita tahulah punya ragam sebagainya sedangkan berguru. Tapi bersyukur lepas. Tapi satu curiosity lah, yang style dia yang luar biasa ni, yang ganjil ni, dia dapat dari mana? Pertama, siapa guru dia? Sebab ada pengkritikan lah, setengah komen daripada beberapa orang profesor atau mereka mengatakan dengan siapa dia berguru. Dan dia dalam tafsir Quran sebagainya ni, dia memang very distinct lah kan. Setengah-setengah orang yang tak terbiasa dengan disiplin yang dia ajar mengatakan macam terkeluar lah. Maksud dia janggal daripada tulisan lain tu. Tapi masa yang sama, bila kita baca buku-buku beliau, dia ni very konservatif dalam penilaian dia, dan kita rasa seronok lah dengar benda yang baru kan, daripada sumber yang tak jumpa dalam tafsir yang biasa lah begitu hari ini. Jadi yang kedua, masalah penerusan. Selepas Naquib al-Attas ni, kerana siapa agaknya, dia bermula awal Naquib al-Attas ni. Usia 30-an, 40-an, masyhur satu dunia. Sekarang ni belum nampak lagi lah, ada disciple lah. Sini semua kita bersyukur. Tapi agaknya ada usaha penerusan tak seorang daripada Melayu Islam begini yang boleh begitu masyhur dan menguasai kan, atau kita kena mulakan proses identifikasi lah siapa ni, tak kira Malaysia ke Brunei ke Singapura atau Indonesia ke, yang boleh meneruskan legasi Prof Naquib al-Attas ni. Okay, Prof. Komen.
Okay. This has been said in my next book, how he know this thing. And in fact, I was telling my wife, I kata, when is it I'm going to speak about this? Because I know people will ask this question, how is it that Professor al-Attas is able to see things so clearly? And I also wondered about this because was part of my work in this book here. Because I'll show you. We still have a bit of time, kan? So let me see if I can find the quotation betul-betul lah. Okay. Nantilah. But it's in here. It's also in here. This is my my short writing about an introduction, or I titled it Prologue to the Commentary of Hujjatul Siddiq. You know, Professor al-Attas wrote that thick book, the commentary on Hujjatul Siddiq. Because I found very fascinating something in here that resonates, that eventually made me write this. In this book, Raniri says, he says, an anonymous arif, an anonymous knower, that dia kata, in this world there is Jannah, you know, heaven. I found it very strange. And this is why sometimes, you know, people say, why Sufi say all these things, you know? How can you have Jannah here in this earth? No, then dia kata, and he says, the meaning of Jannah is ma'rifatullah. Okay? So this statement in this book, Lataiful Asrar, remained in the back of my mind for many, many years because it makes no sense. Okay, I understand ma'rifatullah, but how is it is Jannah? It's a paradise. Then one time I was in London, of all places. I found a book written by an Orientalist, and it's a writing about, he was making citation of something from a commentator of the Quran of the Sufi tradition by the name of Ruzbihan Bakli Shirazi. I think that the commentary is called Araishul Bayan, if I'm not mistaken. And Bakli Shirazi was commenting on the word, you know, Innal muttaqina fi jannatin wa nahar. For the muttaqi, they are gifted have gardens and rivers. So this is my translation of his tafsir in English. I do not want to read you in Arabic. You all tidur. All right? But please, if you allow me, it's a bit long, but it will answer your question. Because I have tried to understand this for decades, because I was working on this in 1990s. So remember that this is just one phrase from here, and it kept in the back of my mind. So this is what it is. Al-Attas' metaphysical framework, because this whole thing is basically, prolegomena to the metaphysics of Islam, is not a mere philosophical construct. It's not something he construct from the mind. It's not a philosophy. It is a restatement of the theological precepts from the Aqidah of Al-Sunnah wal Jama'ah, built upon spiritual cognition, ma'rifah, which comes from God and deposited in his qalb. That special knowledge affords one with the knowledge of an integrated system that describes reality and truth, upon which right action is based. Such position of certainty, position with yaqeen, he speaks with yaqeen. That's why he speaks to the Arab, what are you? Because he knows what he's talking about. Now, because for those of you who are familiar with Professor al-Attas, he knows what he's talking about. Cuma we don't know how to come to his level. Of course, we never reach his level. Such position of certainty is the state and station, maqam wa ahwal, of a person who is truly among the people of truth, Ahlul Haq. And al-Attas is clearly one of them, as described by Ruzbihan Bakli Shirazi. He says, for the people of truth, Ahlul Haq, in this world, there are gardens in their hearts, qulub. There are gardens in their intellect, uqul. There are gardens in their spirits, arwah. And there are gardens for their innermost ground of being, sir. Macam Sufi says, qaddasallah sirrahum. The gardens of the hearts, Jannah for the qulub, is the meadow of perfection. Rawdatul Itqan. Look at Professor al-Attas' works. His buildings, his writings, very precise. Oh, really? You go to his house, everything in the proper place. Rawdatul Itqan, meadow of perfection. And now this is my translation. The gardens of the intellect is the park of illuminative knowledge. Bustanul Irfan. That's why I say he has ma'rifah. He has ma'rifah, bustanul arifah. And it's a bustan, it's greater than many of us maybe. Because we all have a little bit of ma'rifah of Allah Ta'ala. But him, Allah Ta'ala give more. The gardens of the spirits, the arwah, is the sanctuary of clear exposition, hadiqatul bayan. Look at his writing. It's so clear. Cuma we don't have clarity of his language. We call it difficult. For him, it's very clear. Just like Schrodinger's equation, it's very clear. But for us, sampai mati tak faham. And the gardens of the innermost being, the asrar, the sir, is the paradise of Iyan. That means he has what is called mushahada and mu'ayana. This is something that has to do with the descent of the ontological being. The ontological being. Something else, I will mention something else. Now, each of the gardens has rivers, trees, and fruits and flowers. The river of the garden of the hearts contains the water of eternal life, which flows in it the characteristics of divine manifestation, na'tut tajalli, from the springs of divine unity, meaning uyun wahdaniyah. What this means is his name will be forever mentioned because the way he writes, it becomes a testimony of him. See, because he has touched upon something which is the sifa of Allah Ta'ala, that is the true knowledge, and true knowledge will remain. Just like the law of gravity. It may come from a kafir like Newton, but it's true and real. So it will remain. Sampai mati kita ingat Isaac Newton. That's what it is, knowledge. It will have this na'at tajalli. It will remain with you because you have partake from the ilm which is right, which is the sifa of Allah Ta'ala. So this is why seeking knowledge is a spiritual adventure. It is not for vain. It is not for nothing. It's not laibun walahun. It is really a jihad, So Allah, this is very fascinating. And because of this, what he writes is not contaminated by imperfections of human condition, the kadurat bashariyah. It makes the heart alive with the light of certainty so that the knell of the death of ignorance does not inflict them. Its trees are the trees of faith, ashjarul iman, and its fruits are the lights of certainty, nurul yaqeen. Look at you all, look at us. From what he has written, we have this thing called yaqeen now. So we are no longer perturbed by ignorance and shak. So we have nurul yaqeen. And this is why following a teacher is very important, the right teacher. Macam Dato Zaini, when it comes to watch engineering, dia ada toke dia di Sweden. Salah silah dia, jangan kacau. So, the river of the gardens of the intellect is the milk of omnipotence from the albanul qudra, in which Allah Ta'ala has given them drink for them to witness the purity of the lights of omnipotence, whose illuminative knowledge is inherited through the aspect of his benevolence and majestic omnipotence. Its trees are wisdom and its flowers are intelligence. Look, he gives us wisdom, he gives us intelligence. The river of the gardens of the spirit is the river of the unveiling of his aspect, the jamal, the beauty, whose spring is the sea of majesty, jalal, from which God gives them to drink, to ameliorate the hearts as they taste the delightful pleasure of apprehending the beauty and the vision of his majesty. Its trees are love, mahabbah. You love Allah now. You love the Prophet now.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. You see, mashallah. And the flowers are longing, shauq, and its fruits are passionate love, ishq. You know, you become more attracted to the Prophet, more attracted, becoming more obedient to Allah Ta'ala. Not to him. Not to him. But you have to make suhbah with him because he will always give you proper guidance in terms of understanding. This is why Dr. Hilmi gave me a book on some of the sayings of Ibn Arabi. It says, when you sit in front of a teacher, when you do talaqi, your heart is like a beaker, a container, and your sheikh, your teacher will pour in it right knowledge, true knowledge, as long as you remain with him. That's why you always need to be with a true teacher and to rekindle balik. The river of the garden of the innermost being, the innermost ground of being, is the unveiling of the holy essence. Maknanya Allah Ta'ala will give him understanding of Zatul Muqaddas. Is the separation of his endless effulgence, the faid. Allah Ta'ala will give him faid. You know, as I said, you know, knowledge is four kind: wahyu, ilham, wahyu, hikmah, ilham, and last kali ilm. Wahyu we all don't get. Hikmah, some people Allah Ta'ala will give, and all the prophets. Ilham, everybody will give for the chosen one. Everybody he will give for alama fujura wa taqwa. The last one, ilm, you carilah the ilm. See, so this is what it is. See, last one. Through this the fight, God, Allah, strengthens the human condition as long as their hearts remain firm and steadfast at the arrival. And this is why Prophet al-Attas always remind us, at least I remember, says Zaini, always remember the dua of the ulama is La tuzi' qulubana ba'da idh hadaitana. The steadfast on iman and tawheed, to remain there. Because the trees is the affirmation of tawheed. The flowers, the affirmation of isolation, tafreed, meaning you know how to make Allah Ta'ala fardaniyah, the oneness of Allah Ta'ala. And the fruit is the realization, the tahqiq. And this explains more in that book commentary of Jatu Siddiq, where he begins, Raniri begins, you know, فَحَقَّقَ حَقَّهُمْ حَقَّ تَحْقِيق. This is what it is. So,
Ini buku yang mana?
have not been printed.
This one?
No. No. Different book.
So, nanti kena syarah buku ni.
So al-Attas is known for his precision in his productive and creative works, from the buildings he built and designed, from the intellectual framework of institutes and advanced centers of research that he designed, built, and directed. His intellectual, scholarly, philosophical, metaphysical, religious writings, to the eyes of the informed readers, are composed in his unique style, writing in prose and poetry with clarity and indelible imprint of his precision in thought and argumentation, bayan. His exposition of Sufi metaphysical ideas are expounded with such clarity, erudition, and profundity, signifying that he possesses illuminative knowledge, ma'rifah, where secrets of the realm intelligible and imaginal worlds are deposited in his heart with irfan and succinct, clear exposition of bayan. Divine unity, Tawheed, is sine qua non in his exposition of the metaphysics of Islam, and the fruits of his labors are now appreciated by new generation like us. Despite being in the midst of general confusion and error in knowledge, there are lots of confusion now, right? Amongst those who fail to, there's a confusion, error of knowledge among those who fail to understand him and his contribution. In his refutation, this is it, Dato Sabiri. In his refutation, with great aplomb and panache, to confound Drewers, the Orientalists, he refers to the knowledge that he possesses. This is your question. It's a matter of basic knowledge, whose knowledge is not merely gathered from books, but more so from experience and reflection, whose insight into it is not merely a matter of academic preoccupation, but a matter of belief and faith, and definite commitment to a particular attitude towards life. Because unknowns to Drewers, al-Attas is not merely a nominal Muslim. He is brought up and nurtured in a milieu alien to Drewers, a non-Muslim, because al-Attas is, after all, he's studying the field, he's studying and reflecting upon his own culture and tradition and religion, which are for him familiar and coherent, because he has smelled the breath of the Sufi. And he not only comes from the family of Sufis, but is also descended from generations of ancestors who were Sufis and saints, scholars and savants of Islam, stretching over 1,000 years. One of the ancestors was Syed Muhammad al-Idrus, the Sheikh of Syed Abu Habs Omar Bashayban of Hadramaut, who initiated Raniri in the Rifa'iyya order. Al-Attas is the 38th descendant of the Prophet from the line of Hussein, the grandson of the Prophet. So if you ask me, who will inherit, just students. Huh?
Special DNA.
The DNA is not blood DNA, but the prophets did not inherit bloods, but knowledge and guidance.
So he studied Araniri. If you look back into the Hamzah Fansuri, I was introduced to Hamzah Fansuri when I was age 17. Datuk saya lah masa tu. Dia kata nanti masuk universiti, dia pergi cari orang ni. Ingat semua universiti tu kat Universiti Melaya. Dia tahu kat universiti tu kat Kuala Lumpur kan, Universiti Melaya lah. Dia cari orang ni. When I was 17, masa tu SPM kan. Tak, masa tu kita selalu pergi masjid. Datuk tu pun nak bagi nasihat tu, tengok orang ni. Kata cari orang ni. Jadi I was introduced to him when I not even 18, 17, masa tu lepas SPM. Then saya pun carilah orang yang, then luckily masa tu ada program syarahan dia tentang buku merah tu yang kebudayaan tu.
Islam saya Quran air.
Masa tu Pak Hasan buat yang arrange lah tahun 83. Something like that.
Oh, I was in the US at that time.
My first time. Masa tu tak faham apa lah tu. Tapi sebab Datuk suruh dengar ni, kan terdengar je lah. Sebab bila kita baca yang Hamzah Fansuri tu, Datuk saya boleh baca tu. Hamzah Fansuri tu. Dia ada Malay. So, buku tu ada Malay and English. So dia kata siapa yang boleh faham ni, dia kata you possess vast knowledge in relation to deeper meaning of Islam. Dia kata, we were trying to find that book at that time. And then ada buku Araniri keluar, yang buku yang tebal Araniri tu. So pun dia selalu bagi syarahan tentang buku Araniri tu juga. Dan we were lucky lah at that time, Abim yang bawa benda tu. Yang event dia tu masa tu, Casis equivalent was Abim lah masa tu. Abim yang yang perkenalkan mana tu guru Abi ialah Syed Naquib al-Attas, ya. Dan masing-masing dalam Habib kena bacalah buku yang tu makna agama dan asas akhlak tu.
Yeah.
So that was something that everyone must read and understand. Cuma just to compliment the question tadi lah. Dan daripada generasi situlah ada lahirnya. Cuma lepas pada adanya Istad, barulah ramai orang belajar proper. Sebelum tu I don't think he was able to do it.
Yeah.
And I think the vast number of students came from Kasis. So, am I right?
Yeah.
Yang baru dia 10 orang PhD daripada Kasis.
Penulisan dari institusi dah
berlaku yang can understand, appreciate, and we give them time lah. These graduates, I think they are in the age of mostly 30s.
Yeah.
So assuming they have another 30-40 years to contribute.
Dulu nak usah Indian dulu kan. Lalu tengok generasi baru dah ramai datang. Dan dia sana dia repeating the same thing yang terdengar. Tapi his memory dia intact. Sama. Betul enthusiasm baru ni ramai lah. So in fact jadi Indian dulu heran mengapa VC buat cases ni kan. Orang engineer tak appreciate macam ni kan. Now you can see how is a great mind. Buat begitu kan di sini.
So
atau majariah juga.
Scholarly institution must host scholars.
Yeah.
Dia terbalik tau. Sekarang ni scholar must host institution. Dia sepatutnya terbalik. Kita bagi kebebasan kepada scholars. Sebab scholars tu ada je punya kemahuan dia, ada je punya kaedah dia, ada punya adab dia, yang benda yang dia nak perjuangkan. Sebab tu kalau you go to America, there is a rank of professor called university professor. They have no retirement for them. It's a lifelong tenureship, and they do whatever they want.
Itu yang tak pun.
Sebagai contohnya Michael Porter kan. Michael Porter tu dia nak mengajar satu sekali setahun. Kat Harvard tu dia mengajar sekali setahun kan. Itulah kali pertama dia mengajar tu macam rockstar tau. Punya dewan 1,000 orang masuk apa semua. Saya pernah hadir kuliah dia lah. Dia punya student tu macam ni lah. Kameranya dengan apa. Orang yang jaga dia punya mic ni, dia must capture as much. Sebab sekali setahun. Ya, dia cakap situ lebih kurang dalam sejam setengah. Dia take question half an hour. It's done for the year. Habis. KPI dia sekali mengajar. Yang lain tu pulang pada dia nak tulis buku ke. Dia nak
satu cerita menarik mengenai Istad ni. Bangunan. Kita rakam kot.
Okay. This live.
Ya, okay. This
filter lah sikit.
Perasmian Istad ni kan special building tu semua kan. Jadi ketika itu yang beri terusan TMX itu kan. Maha guru dia yang dipanggil balik di penghormatan sebagainya. Tapi bajet tinggi. Sebab spesifikasi dia bukan JKR lah.
Betul.
Jadi masa yang mengiringi ya. Kewangan kita mengiringi profesor kita. Jadi dia bijak sindir lah. Dia kata bersindir dengan orang bijak ni orang main kan. Jadi katakan cantik bangunan ni Bapak Profesor. Tapi ini melebihi spek JKR ni. Ya betul dia kata. JKR bangun tu 30 tahun. Saya tu 300 tahun dia kata. Dia pukul sekali je.
So, question please. Okay, kalau tak kita dah pukul 12 dah sebab janji. Sebab kita ada ini live ni. Live telecast sampai ke kawan kita yang Amin Qureshi daripada Harvard University pun following. This is 12 hours different maknanya pukul 12 tengah malam di Harvard. Okay, thank you for having us, Professor Zaini. And
thank
this,
you,
I think, conclusion our discussion on this book. I thank you for your time, and then the rest coming to listen and then to take part in discussion. As I mentioned, next meeting will be on Himpunan Risalah Syed Naquib al-Attas. It is a Malay version of his thinking, and this has been for 30 years. I think more than 30 years. Yeah. He wrote 30 years ago, but probably can reflect probably another 10 or 15 years or 20 years. The ideas then you can see that the consistency on many things, on the definition, on the methodology, way of thinking, and it's very interesting to learn a scholar from that perspective. Kalau dulu kita ada orang yang belajar tentang Araniri, tentang Hamzah Fansuri, tentang ramai yang lain lah, macam-macam, ya. Saya fikir perlu kita juga ada satu pengajian tentang Syed Naquib al-Attas ni, sebagaimana yang Profesor Zaini sebutkan, while he's around lah. Saya fikir itu satu perkara yang kita boleh belajar macam mana dia boleh menulis. Terkadang 92 tahun orang dah fikir, tak fikir tulis buku lah. Tak ada orang tulis buku umur 92 tahun. Orang 70 tahun pun kalangan sekolah biasa ni pun dah main cucu aja. So it shows that commitment and passion on this, and nothing to do with career development, nothing to do with contribution to knowledge. Is something that you have to do because this part of you. Yeah. Saya pun nak jual buku juga. Boleh jual buku tak? Buku ni, buku sungai ni, tafsir sungai ni, diterbitkan oleh Kasis dan Akademi Jawi. Jadi buku tu ada di pasaran. Cuma hari ni kebetulan saya ada 2 pack tu kat situ. Tak tahu mana nak letak. Ya. Jadi kalau boleh, siapa nak boleh ambil lah. Saya bagi, sebenarnya Syukri tak bagi diskaun. Tapi hari ni saya bagi diskaun. Untuk hari ni saja, so that I need that seat. Ya, okay, itu saja. Jumpa lagi 16 hari bulan Disember akan datang. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.